Hey, what's up everybody, Isaac here coming to you with another New World video. And today's video is going to be a PvE DPS build for your dungeons. And I thought I'd like to get this video out tonight just in case you want to use this on your next mutation rotation, which starts tomorrow morning. So, this is going to be featuring the Rapier and the Ice Gauntlet. Rapier is going to be the star of the show, but the Ice Gauntlet, it's going to put in some work as well. So, I'm going to go pretty in-depth with this discussion, but we are going to do a quick 2 to 3 minute once over in case you just want to see the build and move on with your life. But for those of you that want a little bit more of the details, stick around. I'm going to try to add some timestamps so you can jump around that way, and also going to do a walkthrough on the Lazarus so you can see how we use it in action. One little disclaimer is I did use Entomb instead of Ice Spike, and the main thing on our Ice Gauntlet is the Ice Pylon and the Ice Storm. But if you want a little extra survivability, use Ice Tomb, but otherwise I would suggest adding a third skill. And then with our Rapier, we're using Flurry, Tondo, and Flourish and Finish. And it is important that you know the specific skills that you're using and the order that you're using them in, because if you do not, you are not going to put out very much damage. So first things first, we are just going to show you the main combo that we're going to do, and you're basically going to repeat it over and over throughout the dungeon. And we're going to discuss why later, but for now we're just going to once over show you. So the tank comes in, he gathers up these mobs and he stacks them there. We're going to go ahead and oops, I wasn't supposed to do that. But we're going to come along, we're going to drop off our Ice Pylon. Then we're going to go and drop this Ice Storm, and we're going to hit him with our Spike, and then we're going to come in with our Rapier, hit him with a Tondo, hit him with a Flurry, hit him with one more Tondo, then Flourish and Finish. And there's a specific reason why we need to do that combo in order to output the most damage that we possibly can, but we'll discuss that later on. So, the build, the Rapier. So, gonna go a little more in depth later, but for now, just screenshot it, throw it into your character, and call it good. And the Ice Gauntlet, you know, for those of you that want to get in, get out, screenshot it, throw it into your character, call it good. Keep in mind, this is only level 18 out of 20. The next two I will add is Defiant Freeze and Refreshing Frost. Another good option instead of Ice Spike is to take Ice Shower. But we'll cover more of that later on. Attributes. You know, if you're getting started off, I would go a max of 150 and 150 Constitution. My food did run out, so I need to pop that really quick so we can. Whoa, where am I at here? Yeah, it's the last one. Use it. Use it or lose it. Okay, so we popped our food. Character attributes. And you want to get to 150 Constitution maximum. Anything more than that, you might as well forget about this build because you're splitting up your stats too much. And you're going to want to try and get to at least 150 Intelligence, 200 Dex. This is minimum. Reality, you want to try and get down to 100 Con maximum as soon as you can. And then at that, we're going to go, you know, roughly something like that. Close to 215 Dex, 200 Intelligence. And then from that point on, we do want to try and get down to 50 Con. And then we can go up to, you know, I'd probably go 250 Dex, you know, something like this. And then once we really get cooking, we're going to go ahead. And this is basically going to be our ultimate build right here. 260 Intelligence, 250 Dex. So the sooner you can work yourself up to this, the better. But getting started off, try 100 Con, 150 Con if you have to. And we'll talk a little bit more about survivability and some things you can do, but let's jump into the weapons real quick. And we got, obviously you have to have the Bane and, you know, have Intelligence or Dexterity. Personally, I'd prefer to have Dexterity, but this is the one that I found, so it works. The only reason I like Dexterity is that way this could double for different builds, but this still could double as a Fire Staff build, so it's all good. or avoid Gauntlet build. But anyways, then our Ice Gauntlet, we do have Intelligence on here, and Ancient Bane, that's the important part. So Unending Thaw, I think this is a really good perk to have on your Ice Gauntlet. And Quintando, that's fine. There is one more, Leeching Flurry, that would be a really good one to have to give yourself higher survivability, and that way you can just stick in there and output damage a little bit more consistently with that extra survivability. So I would definitely suggest you do try and get Leeching Flurry, but Quintando is fine for me. Then Enchanted is nice. Anytime you can get something that's going to add another extra perk of damage, all the better. So that basically covers the basic build, but we're going to go over our equipment now. So, I'm not going to go super in depth with it, but I got Dexterity on here and Ancient Ward, of course, because that's specifically what we're using it for, but you just need to have Ward. Anything else that you can find, perfect. So our jewelry is actually pretty important here. So one of the reasons is your amulet. You want to get protection for whatever dungeon type you are doing. Protection and health would be a good option to have. That's what I'm using. So we have flame protection, and we have health, and we have intelligence. I have a gold one that has all of these, plus another perk, but it has strength. And we need intelligence, not strength, so there we go. But having this amulet is going to help you drop your con a lot quicker, a lot faster. So the sooner you can get an amulet like this, the faster you're going to get down to 100 con, get down to 50 con, and possibly even 5 con. This ring I feel like is a pretty good ring. There's possibly some better options, but we do thrust damage with our rapier, and we're doing bleed damage. So the keen awareness is also going to let us hit more crits, which our crits do more damage. So the bloodletting bleed you apply lasts 29% longer. This one's not crazy good, but there's times when it can help us out. Because basically, say we're jumping around, we apply our bleeds, we got our bleeds applied, and then we get ourselves in trouble. The bleed's still ticking because we can't get the finish off, but then we come back and we get the finish off before the bleeds run out. So the longer it's left bleeding, it's going to do some extra damage. So having that, it's going to let us do a little more damage. So this is a great ring because, well, let's take a look at it. When we do a normal attack, see this little arrow? That means it's thrust damage. We do a flurry, it's thrust damage. We do the Tondo, it's actually a slash damage, so it doesn't help with that one, but that one's a very low damage dealer. And then our flourish and finish. The flourish is a slash, but the finish is a thrust, I think. So let's see, let's take a look at it again. Flourish, finish. But the bleed stack's consumed, it's just considered bleed damage, it's not thrust. So it's not like you're doing crazy amounts of thrust damage. The main damage is the bleed damage that's finished off with your flourish. So let's get a little bit more into depth with that. So if we take a look at flourish and finish, flourish performs an attack dealing 60% weapon damage, staggering and pushing back enemies. So obviously the first part of it, that's pretty basic, pretty limited. 60% damage, super minimal, and the pushback is nice. Anytime you can stagger the enemies, well, they can't be doing damage to us. So having a little bit of crowd control is always good. Then press light attack at the end of flourish will perform the follow-up attack finish, and this is where the magic comes in. Finish lunges forward, dealing 120% direct weapon damage, which is obviously more than the 60, but it's still not anything crazy. So, but where the real magic comes in is bleeds on any target hit, dealing 110% of their damage immediately. So you stack up the bleeds, and then the finish is going to consume all of the bleeds and do 110% of the bleed damage immediately upon using the finish skill. So we apply the first stack of bleed with the Tondo, we apply another stack of bleed with the flurry, one more stack of bleed with another Tondo, and then we go into the flourish and finish. because at that point we have 3 stacks of bleed, and 3 stacks of bleed is the maximum amount. So the key here is we want to get 3 stacks of bleed as fast as we can, and then we want to finish it off, and that is going to be the big huge damage dealer. So once again, we go into with a Tondo, we go in with a flurry, and we go in with another Tondo, and then we go flourish finish, and over again, and that is how we are going to melt things, along with the initial AoE that we stacked with our ice gauntlet. And we'll talk about this a little bit. So watch these numbers. 727 is what it's hitting crit, but then once the ice storm wears off, what's it gonna crit for? Come on, let's see a crit, let's see a crit, let's see a crit. Come on, you can do it. There, 656. So that's one thing that you want to keep notice, is that when the ice pylon attacks inside of the ice storm, it does extra damage. So that's one reason that we want to get the ice storm and the ice pylon ticking at the same time. The ice pylon lasts a lot longer, but at the end of the day, we want to mainly focus on the rapier, but it is good to have those AoE ticks going on the ice gauntlet when we can as well. Get some massive AoE damage to big clumps. So that's our whole deal with this build, is we are trying to nuke down clumps. Preferably somebody else is taking out the individual archers. If we have to, we can, but preferably we are focusing on the clumps, because we're going to do some massive clump damage with this build. And so that kind of covers, you know, a little bit more in depth of the combos and why we are doing the specific combos. But let's go ahead and jump into the weapons skill tree. So start off with Tondo. Slash so quickly that extends the reach of your blade up to 5 meters. The strike deals 50% weapon damage and applies a bleed. That's the main thing. It applies bleed. And we're going to take this one down just 2 steps. When applying the first bleed stack, an opponent, Tondo's cooldown is reduced by 10%, which is good, because it's going to come back faster and let us get that 3rd stack of bleed. If you only hit one target, even on a blocked hit, Tondo's cooldown is reduced by 25%, which is nice because, you know, we're often going to be using this against bosses and stuff. It's not like a crazy perk, but it's definitely going to help a little bit. The last one, we don't necessarily need to increase initial hit from Tondo by 100% if you're at least 4 meters away from your target. We're not going to be trying to worry about how far we are away from the enemies. We're just going to use it when we use it. And this one wouldn't be bad, but the only thing is there's better perks to grab. So that's the main reason we skip out on this one. Not because it's bad, but it's just not as good. You know, this isn't the damage dealer. The damage dealer is consuming the bleed stacks. So we're going to look at this one, flourish and finish. Performs an attack dealing 60% weapon damage. We talked about all of that, and yeah, we talked about all of that just a little bit ago, but let's talk about the additional perks. Gain grit on both flourish and finish, which is obviously a good thing. Making sure that when we do go to do this skill, they're not going to be able to stop us from doing the skill. Gain 20 stamina when successfully hitting a target with finish. You know, not terrible, of course. The more stamina we have, more survivability we have to dodge away, block, do what we need to do. Each tick of damage from Tondo's bleed reduces the cooldown of this ability by 3.5%. Once again, we want to cycle through this stuff as fast as we can. So any kind of reduction in skills, you know, the cooldown is pretty nice. And then we do take this all the way down to the ultimate, whatever you want to call this here. Finish deals 150% of the Rapier's bleed damage instead of only 110%. So that's pretty massive, because that's what this build is all about, and it adds an extra 40%. So definitely need this skill with this build. And then we'll move on to Flurry. Enter pose stance and unleash a series of 5 quick thrust attacks with each strike, dealing more damage. So it starts off at 46 quick, you know, slashes, and then ends at 82. The nice thing about this is if you absolutely need to, you can dodge out of it. We don't ever want to do that if we can help it, and here's why. Because, well, at the end we get a stack of bleed, and if we dodge out of it, we don't get our stack of bleed, and this is all about applying bleeds. So each hit of Flurry does 25% more block damage. You know, not super important, but we do have to go all the way to the bottom, so it's whatever. Each hit of Flurry reduces its cooldown by 7%. This is pretty important. but regardless, we have to go down to the bottom, and it's important because we want to cycle through stuff as fast as we can. So anytime we reduction in cooldowns, it's a good thing. Each hit of flurry extends the rapier's bleed by 1 second. Once again, a good thing just to make sure we can get the finish off before the bleed expires. But once again, we are trying to consume the bleed as soon as possible, so it's a little bit whatever. And this is the important one. Last hit of flurry will inflict the enemy with a stack of bleed, dealing 10% weapon damage per second. So the important thing here is that we need to stick on the target for the duration. That way we finish off and we get this stack of bleed. And then we are going to go ahead and finish it off with the flourish and finish. And that is how we get our big damage. So let's take a look at these other little perks that we add. Reduce all rapier cooldowns by 1% on any hit. Obviously helpful as we talked about. We want to cycle through these skills as fast as possible. Deal 10% more damage when your target has greater than 50% health. That's just some extra free damage for half of the life of an enemy. Sure, we won't complain about that. Deal 5% more damage to targets with a rapier bleed. And we're constantly trying to apply bleeds, so 5% more damage is kind of like a free 5% continuously. And then these other two, any heavy attack, we're not really going to be doing heavy attacks, and we don't really need to extend the bleeds anyways. And this is the middle attacks of your auto, doing 8% extra damage, but we're rarely going to be doing autos. We will occasionally, but it's not important because we're going to not be doing very many autos, and that is not where the damage output is going to come from. So one thing that people do differently than I do is some people will use this one, but I prefer this one because it is going to do extra damage. There's obviously can be a trade-off, survivability versus damage. Sometimes if you have more survivability, you can do more damage. But personally, I'd just take the straight up more damage. Deal 10% more damage when your stamina is below 30%, and gain 3 stamina on any hit. If you have more stamina, you have more survivability because you can block or dodge or do what you need to do to get out of town. But personally, I'm preferring this one, but certainly take this one if you feel you need it. So the next one, deal 10% more damage when your health is full. This one's pretty important because we are going to be getting topped off a lot by our healers, and as a DPS, we are going to be losing health. Obviously, you're in mutation. Sometimes just by hitting an enemy, you lose your health. So oftentimes, if we're sitting in a sacred ground, we'll be topped back off to full health again by the time we go to hit the enemy the second time. But this is, free extra damage for large amounts of the time that we are going to be attacking. So then critical strikes reduce all cooldowns by 5%. It's definitely a bonus anytime we can reduce cooldowns. It's huge because we are trying to cycle through as fast as possible. So there is going to be small amounts of downtime on our skills, but not huge amounts. So a lot of times we're going to be dodging in between skills and that kind of thing, so it works out kind of perfectly. So most of this tree, it's kind of a no-brainer. There's not too many options different you can do. The only real big change you can make is swapping these two here. So let's move on to the Ice Gauntlet here. Definitely a few different options you can do. You can take this tree all the way to the bottom. You can definitely go with Ice Shower. If you go all the way to the bottom here, you need extra skill points anyways, so that's definitely not a bad option. The nice thing about Ice Shower is it will root your enemies, and when they're rooted in place, that's just that much easier for you and your teammates to do damage to them. Increase Ice Shower duration to 7 seconds, so it's pretty important. The real important one here is you take this one to the bottom and then it applies rend. So a 10% rend, so that means everybody's going to do extra damage. So definitely a strong perk to use, one that I will probably use off and on. So for me, it's basically either Ice Shower or Ice Spike. And then we are taking these two as well. Obviously you could substitute, something out for another, but that's basically what I would substitute, is either Ice Spike or Ice Shower. So the Ice Spike creates a trail of spikes, and basically the trail is going to do some damage, but the main damage is at the end of the big spike. And if you want the spike to go off early, you can click it early and it will go off early. Cooldown for this ability reduced by 10% if an enemy is hit by the mighty spike. You know, extra cooldowns are nice, but it's not that crazy because we're not trying to use this one tons. We're basically just cycling through our skills, and then we're getting on the rapier and sticking on the rapier for the most part until we need to drop another ice storm. And then empowered spike, mighty spike's damage increased by 20% when hitting an enemy below 30% health. So nice to get that extra little bit of damage. Increased damage by 10% as dagger to the path of spikes. So having that, you know, extra CC is definitely a nice thing. You know, when you're CCing the enemy, they're not doing damage to us or our friends. Ice shards fire from the sides of the mighty spike to hit a wider area, which is nice. That means we're getting some nice AoE damage when we fire it into those clumps. So a nice thing about this too is it does have a low cooldown. Granted that we're not going to be taking advantage of that tons, but there's going to be times where, you know, you get in trouble and you do pull out your ice gauntlet and you attack from a distance for a little while until things cool down and you can get right back into the heat of things. And the little side perks we're using: increase critical damage of ice gauntlet abilities by 10% while stamina is full. Increase critical chance by 50% when hitting an enemy in a frosted area or when hitting an enemy with frostbite. So a lot of these perks are not going to help us a lot. They're about mana, and we're just we don't care about mana. And heavy attacks will root a target for 1 second, you know, if they're in the ice storm. But we're really not sitting around doing heavy attacks. We're mainly trying to focus on getting our rapier out, so we're not really too worried about that one. So that's the basic build we are going to do. You know, you can use Entomb, which is nice. It's a very nice bailout safety plan, and I did use this in my run through, but not one that I'm going to run very often. So just a nice bailout plan. You get Fortify after you use it. You get some healing after you use it. You know, and if you go all the way down to the bottom, you can cleanse debuffs, but it's a nice bailout plan, especially for certain dungeons. But if you can, I would suggest try to stay away from it and stick more to the damage dealers. But if you really want it, it's not bad because you can just focus on your ice pylon and ice storm, and then get to business with your rapier. And then you have that bailout plan. Just go and switch your ice gauntlet and Entomb real quick if you get in trouble, and you're good to go. So don't be afraid to use that one if you want a little bit of extra survivability. So that kind of covers all of that information. And if you have any other questions about the build, go ahead and drop them in the comments. One thing I do want to mention, I don't remember if I mentioned it or not, but one great perk to have here is going to be Leeching Flurry. So that means when you are doing Flurry, you're going to be leeching health. So you're going to gain health from the enemies that, you know, the damage you're doing. You're going to get some of it back as health. And that's going to allow you to stay in the fight longer without dodging out. So that's definitely a bonus for extra survivability. So if I had found an ice gauntlet or if I had found a rapier for sale, or I had happened to have one on me with that skill, I would have used it. But for now, the one I have, it's plenty good enough. And then Unending Thaw, definitely a very good perk. I'd suggest that one. So, you know, the two main things I'd say look for, it's not the end of the world if you don't have it. Just make sure you have Ancient Bane, but if you can, get Unending Thaw, Ancient Bane on your Ice Gauntlet. If you can, get Leeching Flurry and, you know, Bane for whichever dungeon you're doing on your Rapier. So I think that pretty much covers the build. So let's go ahead and jump into our walkthrough. So a quick disclaimer, I did update a few of my jewelry pieces and so on since I shot this video. You know, in this video I am running like 83 con, 217 dex, 217 intelligence, and you know, I did try a few different builds. You know, tried with 100 con, tried with 5 con, just test some different things out. And originally when I made this video, I did not have the amulet that has the flame protection on it. So once I added that, it definitely made it a lot easier to get down to 5 con. And I also had a different ring on, so I had a different ring, different amulet, and also, of course, this one skill change that I talked about, I was running Entomb while I was doing this dungeon. So You know, don't be afraid to play around with the build, play around with your gear a little bit, but just some guide, you know, some tips to get you started. So, you know, basically, we'll just kind of let this play out and we'll kind of discuss the approach as we approach the next group of mobs. So our ice pillar is on cooldown. So we are, you know, are we going to wait for our ice pillar? Or are we going to, yeah, we're going to go ahead and drop our big ice storm, go ahead and drop our ice pillar. Then we're just going to go to town with our rapier. You know, pretty basic like we explained. And I don't think I had tested it tons. You probably see me do a few of the wrong combos here, but you know, getting knocked down here definitely doesn't help not having my flame protection amulet, and being at 80 con without the flame protection amulet, you know, it can make you a little bit squishy. But you know, once again, we go ahead and we start jumping in with our combos. You know, like you can see there, we're doing our Tondo, we're doing our Flurry, then we jump into Flourish and Finish. And I think at this point I might not have had my combos figured out quite as well as I should have. I was probably using my Flourish and Finish too often when I only had 2 stacks of bleed built up. But you can see all of these numbers that we're getting. We're getting the ice damage, we're getting bleeds, all at the same time. So anytime that we remember and see, once again, go ahead and drop my ice pylon because it was up again. Then we go to town with our rapier. And at that point I didn't drop my snowstorm because I might as well wait for the next group clump to drop it on. So as soon as we get a few more spawned in, hopefully, yep, there I went and dropped my ice storm. And then we go to town with the rapier, so that way we're getting ticks from the ice storm, and we are also working with our rapier. So we're getting multiple weapons doing multiple amounts of damage at the same time. So really strong for helping your team just nuke through those clumps. You want to keep focusing on clump damage as much as possible. So basically, rinse and repeat. Anytime you got your ice pylon back up, go ahead and try and drop that. One little trick with your ice pylon. Say you drop your ice pylon, but it's time to move on to the next place, but your ice pylon is still alive. Hold down the skill button for, I think, a second, and it will get rid of your ice pylon, put it on cooldown, so you can get it ready for your next group of clump mobs, and you know, have it back off cooldown to drop on the next clump. So as you're running away from your current group of mobs that you're attacking, don't be afraid to hold down the skill and get rid of your ice pylon. Make sure it's ready for your next clump. So we go ahead and grab what loot we have. Typically I'm not too worried about grabbing the loot unless I see a gold bag, but if it's convenient I'll grab it even if it's a purple bag. So once again, we drop our ice pylon, we go ahead and drop our ice storm on, and we go to town. Got a teammate with a nice perfect gravity well there to help group everything up, and we get some good ticks going on. Different groups are going to do this one differently, but one of our group members went ahead and called the boss from the next room and took him back here. It's not a bad idea. You get this fight out of the way. You get 2 fights out of the way without, you know, ever stopping from fighting. Good way to do it if you have a healer that's on the ball and he is sinking, to go ahead and call this boss in here. Go ahead and take him out right here instead of fighting him down below. You know, there's so many different ways you can run these dungeons, little tips, little tricks you can pick up. So, don't be afraid of changing up your strat, trying somebody else's strat. So, moving right along, that boss would have been right here, but there's just one archer left here to finish off. So, go ahead and finish him off and then start opening this portal. Ideally, somebody should have already been opening that portal. The second they got down here, somebody should have started opening the portal. The second I got down here, I should have started opening the portal, but guess I was sleeping on the job, and instead I wanted to join in the fun of taking out the mob. But that's the way it goes, but ideally you start working on that portal right away. So once again, same thing here. We should be dropping an ice pylon, dropping an ice storm, and then we go to town with our rapier. You know, anytime you can, sometimes it's hard to keep track of where the tank is and whatnot, but try to find the backside of the mobs. For one, to get the backstab damage, but two, to try and keep yourself from taking damage that's unnecessary. If they're swinging at the tank and you end up behind the tank or between the tank and the mob, you're going to take damage from the enemy that they never intended to give you. So sometimes in all the confusion, it's hard to make sure you avoid all of the unnecessary hits, but keep that in mind. Try to stay on the opposite side of the clumps as your tank. It's going to help you live longer, and it's going to help you do more damage. So here we try and catch as many of the mobs as we can with our ice storm. You can see we got most of them inside of it. And I took a nice little hit, so I decided to go and jump into my entomb. Probably wouldn't have had to. It can be handy to have that entomb, so don't be afraid to use it if you feel like it's necessary. Especially getting started off, getting used to the build. Don't be afraid to take entomb, have that one extra little bailout plan. As you can see, I was using it here. So once again, same basics. We get a nice clump. We keep our ice pylon down as often as we can. Drop an ice storm in the middle of the big clump, and well, see, we're not that great for soloing single mobs. You know, right there, I was trying to fight the archer, and then I got knocked into the backs of the other mobs. We don't have a good hard CC, so we're not that great at fighting solo mobs, but that is not our strength. So ideally we stick to our strength, which is applying large amounts of DPS to large groups of mobs. So on this boss, typically what I'm going to do, let the tank go in, let everything set up, try not to take any unnecessary hits, and then we go ahead, get around to the backside, and we try to take out these archers. Because these archers are going to cause lots of damage. If they decide to pick on somebody, there's a good chance that they will take them out. So you can see just how hard those archers do hit me. And I can't see them. One really good weapon to be used for soloing archers is a spear. So it's good if you have a spear player that's constantly taking out all of the archers that you can't get to group up in your clumps. Definitely got to be careful with this guy, because unless you have like 100 to 150 con with a protection amulet, his slam is going to kill you. So you can see even at 83 con, his slam does kill me. I did not have a protection amulet, but if you get around to 83 to 100 con and you do have the protection amulet, you probably will survive his slam, but the next ticket damage is probably going to get you. So this boss is always kind of annoying for me. It's sometimes with all of the AoE stuff going on, it's hard to see when he's going to do his big slam, and especially with a lot of other weapons, you kind of get stuck into an animation lock. Not with this one, we don't have any animation locks that we really get stuck into. So we can typically dodge out of whatever animation we are going through with our rapier especially, but just be careful for the boss and slam, because he will get you. So once again, same thing here. We're kind of trying to stay behind everything, and we're trying to focus on the clumps. We're trying to apply the bleeds to the clumps. We're trying to apply the finish to the clumps every time we get our bleeds stacked up. Then we back out and we cycle through our ice gauntlet skills again and go right back to town with our rapier. Add some bleeds, add another stack of bleeds, add one more stack of bleed, and then go for the flourish and finish. Definitely tell in this video I didn't have my combos down quite as well. I didn't have the science of going from Tondo to Flurry to Tondo and then Flourish and Finish. You know, sometimes I was bouncing around a little bit more than I should have. You know, not just sticking to, you know, the perfect, proper combo. The more you stick to your combo, the more damage you're going to keep doing. But yeah, we're talking about how many stacks we need to do on this guy. As long as you got some decent DPS, all you need is 15 stacks and you're good to go. You go too much higher and you start putting your tank at risk. But here you can see we go ahead and drop our ice pylon and it gets taken out by the boss right away. So I mean, if I was smarter, I'd drop it a little bit further back. Drop the ice pylon, drop the ice storm on him, and go to town. But I didn't want to spend too much time dodging back, wasting time that could be spent on doing some rapier damage, so just dropping the ice pylon wherever I happen to be at the time. And right there on my ice entomb, I might have even pressed it unintentionally. Hard to say, can't really remember for sure, but getting myself into trouble here. Trying to dodge him and getting stuck out in front, caught between him and the tank. Definitely not what you want to do, but see, we got him up to 20 stacks that time. It's what it is. We all survived, but don't need to go that high, that's for sure. Once he starts throwing his little electric storm, it doesn't matter too much where you stand. You know, he's going to hit who he wants to hit. He's not always going to just go for the tank. But you can see right there, he's going for me. But if you are at 5 con and he starts hitting you, you're going to have to start taking some precautions, measurements, because you're not going to survive too long if he keeps hitting you and you're not sitting inside of the heal. But other than that, for the most part, you just kind of sit there and just go to town doing damage. He's not hardly gonna hurt you a whole lot. So, same thing here. I don't know for sure if you're gonna do more damage by switching back and forth between your ice gauntlet or just by sticking to your rapier. So, you know, I am still cycling through my skills, but when you're fighting just one single mob, I do feel like there's a good chance that you're just as well off to just stick solely to your rapier. Obviously, if there is a big group of mobs that you can do AoE damage, for sure you're going to be better off to keep cycling through your ice gauntlet skills as well. But since it's just one single mob, I'm not so sure that you are doing higher output by cycling through your ice gauntlet. So if you want to fighting solo mobs, just stick to the rapier. But when you do have mobs grouped up, keep cycling through those ice gauntlets. So on this part, I definitely prefer to stay on the bottom. And that is because I do not have any good hard CC abilities in this build. So if for some reason I did have to go to top, I would probably prefer to add, you know, switch over to maybe my rapier and a spear. The only problem is the spear does not scale off of intelligence, but it does scale off of dexterity, but we're going to be missing out on a lot of damage. So we'd be having to focus spear for the knockdowns, but since it's kind of split up between two of us and we can kind of nuke them down, I'm able to just kind of stick to doing damage. You know, here, obviously we are going to be using our Ice Gauntlet skills. The storm does add slow to them, and it's going to do some AoE damage to both of the mobs. But just the fact that it adds slow, it's going to help us run away from the mobs if we do need to. But yeah, it can be a little bit tricky if you go up top with the healer and you cannot CC the troops. They will mow you down pretty darn fast. So kind of just mowing through these guys. You can see I did get pretty low one of the times there, but now we're back to the fun part. We got our tank to tank the mobs, and then we just go ahead and start doing damage to them. Add the bleed, and then we went straight into the flourish and finish. So we definitely didn't maximize our stacks there, but when you can, you want to focus on maximizing your bleed stacks. But you ain't always going to be able to. Sometimes you're too busy dodging, and then your skills come off cooldown. Maybe you're going to do your flurry and you get CC'd by a mob and you don't get the bleed off, and you also don't get the cooldown that comes with hitting the enemies with your skill. So you're definitely not always going to get the perfect skill rotation, but it is what it is. We get to go and mine this rock as much as I don't like to. Prefer to jump right in on the fun, fighting the mobs right off the bat, but somebody's got to do it, so might as well grab it. So, same basic rotation. Go ahead and drop the ice storm. Should have dropped my ice pylon first, but it is what it is. Get down our ice skills, get our ice pylon down, and go to work with our rapier. Definitely could be dropping our ice storm back again, but not the end of the world. It's not like there's a big, huge group of mobs, so kind of focusing with the rapier, which is just perfectly fine. But there we go. Remember to drop our ice storm again. Imagine that. I was actually still fairly new to this build when I recorded this video, so definitely was a little bit extra sloppy. Didn't get all of my combos down nearly as good as I would have liked to, like I kind of mentioned earlier in this video, but that's alright. You know, a little bit of practice will definitely make better. But even though not super, super practiced with this build in this, I'm still helping our team output lots of damage. So a real strong build. These guys don't always follow us all the way in, but we should be good on kill score anyways. But a lot of times it's a good idea just to kill those 3 right away. But yeah, on this run, at the beginning of the hallway, I like to just kill those first mobs right away. Sometimes they might not follow you all the way to the end of the hall, and if they don't, and then you miss the mob count by 1 or 2 or 3, well, you're kind of going to regret it. So it's easy enough just to nuke those 3 little mobs down right away. So I figure if I add a little bit of extra damage to them, it's going to encourage them to keep chasing after us. So typically what I would do is I'd stop and kill those first 3 crawlers, and then you drag everything to the steps here and kill the rest of it before you move on to the last room. You know, and one problem is sometimes those creepy crawlers, they'll finally catch up to you and they'll catch somebody off guard and take them out, and it can get you in trouble. I'm not sure if that might be what happened with our healer here. Maybe one of those creepy crawlers finally caught up and he took out our healer. Left unexpecting it. So maybe it'd be better if our healer was up top. Did somebody get that other resource back there? So once again, kind of let things set up. Go ahead and drop our ice pillar. And I did put it in a bad spot. That was my bad. So it got taken out right away. Drop our ice storm and then go to town with our rapier. So when you can, try to remember to drop your ice pillar a little bit off the side of things, so it's not going to get taken out right away by AoE damage. But not, not the end of the world. Sometimes you don't want to go too far out of your way just to drop your ice pillars. Better to just keep at it. Go ahead and drop it and go to town with your rapier. Even if it does go down, it's not like it's going to make the craziest big amount of difference in the damage you do. It is helpful, for instance, we get into this situation, we're low on health, we can back out and cycle through our skills on our Ice Gauntlet. We're still doing some damage while we're getting a chance to heal back up. And it does have that safety net where you got some skills you can use and you can use the basic attack. So if you get yourself into trouble, you get low health, you're out of pots, you can kind of back away a little bit from the fight and attack from a distance. So definitely add some versatility in that sense. Obviously, typically you want to be going to work with the rapier because that's our main damage dealer. So you want to be fighting right inside the clumps. But worst case scenario, you get into a tight situation, you back out and you can still apply at least a little bit of damage from a distance. Between our skills and our light attacks or heavy attacks, see just how hard that archer hits me. One shot, he takes me from full health down to like 5% or something crazy, but that's why it helps a lot to have your protection amulet. It is going to give you a lot more survivability. So even though I'm at like 83 con or something, I put on my protection amulet and I drop down to 5 con, and probably gives me close to the same amount of survivability that I have in this video with 83 con, but without the protection amulet. Makes such a huge difference. I cannot recommend enough. Get yourself a protection amulet. A lot of times you can find a 2-perker, and that's all. The one I showed you at the beginning of this video, it was just a 2-perker, a purple one that I bought off of the market, pretty cheap. I almost have my jewelry to 100, so pretty soon I will be able to make my own amulets. And it's nice to have the 3-perkers, but it's easy enough to make any 2-perker amulet that you want. You can select the 2 perks you want. You can select whether it's intelligence, dexterity, strength, so on and so forth. So that's going to be handy. Looking forward to that. I have like maybe one more level to get to 100, and I'll be able to make my own protection amulets. But other than that, you should be able to find them for relatively cheap on the market. And if not, typically if you mention in global that hey, I should only need one, but we can get both. Mention in chat in global that hey, I want somebody to make me an amulet. I'll give you the mats for it, throw you an extra 1k gold. A lot of people will do it just because, just for the fun of it. But other people, they want to get paid for their work. You don't blame them. But tried sneaking in between his arm there, but typically just go right next to the wall and he's not going to be able to hit you. So this guy does do some pretty good damage, but as long as you're sitting inside of the heal, you should be just fine. Unless you're at 5 con, if you're at 5 con, especially without a protection amulet, he's gonna one smack you. But if you have a protection amulet and you're at 5 con, he you can get away, but you're gonna be super low on health. So we do go ahead and we start with our ice combo. Not sure if that's the best idea. We're probably best off just to stick with our rapier. You know, we should make sure that we get our ice pylon dropped before he falls down and just go to town with the rapier. So we drop the ice pylon so it's down before we need it, and we make sure as soon as he's down we go to town with our rapier. So that's the main damage dealer, but we should take advantage of having that ice pylon, dropping some extra very nice strong damage on him. Obviously in that phase you're doing like, I don't know, what are you doing, like quadruple the amount of damage? Something crazy. So our teammates do back off here. Typically I would just keep throwing DPS to him.
DPS them if we have good DPS.
So if you have reasonably strong DPS and you decide to pull this strat, a lot of times you're going to end up waiting here for quite a long time. But it's whatever, it works either way, as long as you're not cutting it down to the very minute. And I guess he's standing too close. He takes you out. I guess you should stand a little bit behind the ball, but guess I didn't know the exact point. Typically I don't come and sit back here. We just stay on him, attacking him. And there it goes. Drop our ice pillar and we go to town. So once again, I should have dropped the ice pillar a little bit sooner and just went to town with the rapier. You know, I shouldn't be taking the time putting down the ice pillar while I could have been attacking him, but we do get the job done. We get him down. Not like any kind of crazy fast speed run. We get it done in 27.5 minutes. So we do have some time to spare. We do have some points to spare. But there it is, gold run. We'll stop and check out what the scoreboard gave for us, but other than that, pretty much covers the run. Nice and solid. We had one respawn. And that's it. So hope you liked it. Got any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments. Give it a try. Let me know how it goes for you, and we'll catch you on the next one.